how much is actually being anticipated to be spent in debt service. So the really important message in this slide is that we're shifting our strategy for spending from new construction to preservation. This is an eye candy chart, and I'm not going to go through it in detail. You all can look at it. But what I'm trying to, there's always a question of what is preservation. And preservation falls into several different categories. And the important ones in our priority system, where we have road slides, those take top priority of spending. Interstate pavement is second in priority. And then other preventive maintenance and other corrective maintenance are the subsequent priorities. So when we look at how to spend money in preservation, these are the things which that money is attached to. By the way, I neglected to mention on this slide the numbers that are in the bars on the chart represent real projects. So our system of project development, because a project, depending on what they are, can take anywhere from 2 to 5 years to get it into development before it can be constructed. So these are identified, named projects for which there is either engineering or some form of land acquisition or utility relocation going on. So this isn't just artificial numbers. This is based on a system of real identified projects. So what I'd like to share with you right now is, with what we know and what we think we know, what does this gain in terms of outcomes and results? First, we have 3 big categories: safety, bridges, and highways. Safety is a big deal. We said back in 2007 we wanted to cut the number of severe crashes by 50% over 20 years. The green line, the green dash line that you see on this chart, represents the trajectory that we forecast at that time. The blue bars represent where we really are, and the red bars represent, well, so you can see from the blue bars, we're not meeting those objectives. The red bars represent what we've established as our new trajectory, and in order to achieve that, we're increasing the amount of money that we spend on safety-related projects. I don't know if you all know it or not, but something like around the 50% mark of severe accidents in the state of Indiana are, number one, they're on rural roads, and number two, they are a result of people leaving the lanes. And one of the treatments that we are applying is I'm sure some of you have experienced it, the rumble strips in the middle. They in fact wake up drivers and prevent a number of those severe crashes. So that's one. Cable barriers, you've seen them along the interstates, is another. And we're also treating, when we're paving roads now, we're creating a safety edge where drivers, when they wander to the right now they just kind of fall off and they overcorrect getting back. The safety edge gives a little bit of balance so that it isn't such a sharp turn to get it back on. Those are the types of things that we're doing in the arena of safety. And we are escalating the amount of money that we're spending on this in order to achieve that objective.
Do you have to meet these objectives as part of the receipt of federal highway dollars, or is this a standard you set for yourself?
It's a standard that was set nationally. Federal Highway participated in it. We're not required to do it,
Okay.
But we think it's good business.
Okay. I mean, but there's a difference there, and I'm just trying to clarify.
Now, that's clearly one of the missions of NDOT. One of the parts of the mission of NDOT is safety. So, in terms of the monies that I told you that we're looking at in the short term, I'm now going to do a little bit of a projection. Today, when we look at bridges, about 7% of our bridges are in poor condition. A little under 7% are in poor condition. My definition of poor condition is not an unsafe facility. It is a bridge that needs enough work that it's very expensive to repair. The idea being, if you can catch through maintenance, if you can catch the repair work early, you can reduce the amount of money that it costs to do the actual reconstruction or rehabilitation. So when they get into poor category, you spend a lot of money repairing that bridge that also defeats your ability to spend money doing other things.
60 Minutes a couple of weeks ago tried to terrify everybody with this bridge issue, and of course, they showed Pittsburgh that has bridges going back and forth across all those rivers everywhere. And if you were just to give a general comparative statement, are we in better shape than what they appear to be there when they use that example?
We are. I don't think it's a crisis,
Yeah.
but I think like the conversation we had a little bit ago relative to funding and what the fuel taxes mean, it is something that you and I need to address. But we don't have to go nuts about it. We have to have a systemic way to deal with this. Our bridges, we got half of the bridges in the state of Indiana that are 50 years or older. And these bridges were designed for 75.
Yeah.
Now, that's a 25-year runway, right? And the only point is, we need to start taking advantage of that 25-year runway, or it'll get to be impossibly expensive to repair them. And then you can do things like load rating them, cutting down the amount of traffic and the size of traffic, or shutting them down if they're unsafe.
But we are on some program right now.
We are. And what this picture right here is telling you is based on the best of our projections, which once again is done by fairly sophisticated modeling software based on the known condition. We measure the condition of bridges every 2 years, and that creates a large database of what the quality index of those bridges are, and we estimate the amount of money that it takes to move them up the scale, and that develops what the cost structure is for maintaining the bridges. At our current projected spending levels, which is about $273 million a year, over the next 10 years, we'll degrade from about 7% in poor condition, and let me emphasize, poor is not broken and it's not unsafe. It is in condition that's going to take a lot more money to fix. But, so as we sit here today with our estimated funding levels for the next 5 years, the next 10 years, the system will degrade from about 7% to about 12.5%. And this is the money that we think is going to be available from motor fuel taxes, federal government, period. That's with no increases of any kind. There's no intervention in here. This is what we know today. Now, we have targeted in our key performance indicators, we've targeted that we'd like to have less than 8% of our bridges in poor condition. Today, we're in good shape. We are green, if you will. But if you look at this over 10 years, and this aging infrastructure, if you look at this over the 10-year period, if we wanted to achieve this level, we would need to increase our spending by roughly about $60 million a year for 10 years. Further, now some people have accused me of saying that this is like shooting for a D on your report card. And maybe so, maybe not, but if you said we're at the crossroads of America, where should we be? It is our point of view that we should be in the less than 3% of our bridge system in poor condition. And in order to achieve that, that's nearly $100 million more a year than we have available to spend today for the next 20 years. So the perspective here is, what do you want to buy? We can manage the system. We're not going to have unsafe bridges in the current trajectory. we are going to have more that'll cost more to fix.
So, let me make sure that I've got this right, because my initial reaction to those two charts, the bridges and the roadways charts, was that we were somehow or other improving our situation. But the answer to that is only if you spend the money that's indicated in the box to the right. And then one other comment would be, which I think I heard you say, that you say we stand at about 7% today, and under the current service level by 2024, we're going to be at 12.5% poor. So so I'm reading this correctly, okay?
Anticipate, that's if no action is taken to increase the revenues either from the federal government
Okay,
or from the state government.
okay. I bet Brian's glad he's not going to be here 10 years from now.
I can tell you one of us that isn't.
Okay,
Same story, different assets,
yeah,
roadway. So today, we have about 10% of our system that's in poor condition. And at our current spending levels, which is just under $400 million a year, we would project that over the next 10 years, we would land in a little bit worse condition than we are today, which would put us at about 11.5%.
okay. Well, I appreciate your dead honesty here, Carl. I don't know how you help us put together a budget that works here, but that's at least we're getting the picture, all right?
Well, so I'm going to tell you a story in a little bit, but the short version of it is we jointly, we need a strategy.
Right.
And we will have for you, the Joint Transportation Committee, at the end of next summer,
Okay.
we will have a model system that says, here are ways to raise revenue that are specific and targeted to the kinds of problems that we need to solve.
And
Throwing money at gas tax today is a Band-Aid.
Yeah, okay.
That's not a strategy.
Okay. And none of this takes into account my wish list, which is the 6 lanes on 65 and 70 and all that stuff. Is that right?
Got it.
All right. More good news. That was for me.
So we operate in a world where, and you all know this, we operate in a world where we have a fixed amount of money per gallon. So our variable is the number of gallons of gas, and that number is declining. But in some aspects, it is a fixed income, and our escalation costs per year are about 3%. So our buying power on this fixed number or declining number, our buying power declines at a rate of about 3% a year. So, and now we've modeled that into our models. But the point, I guess, is as long as we have the system that we have, we're going to buy less every year with the available funds that we have. Now, we said, okay, we're not going to whine about this. We don't need to say to you, we need more money. We said first we need to take care of what we have. And we've taken on 3 big deals that are intended to regenerate existing money that we can reapply to construction. And those things, we have a fair amount of excess property that's accumulated over the years. We're in the process of trying to sell that property today. We think that'll net one-time deal somewhere between $9 and $15 million. So that's one of the actions that we're taking to try to put more money back into the construction world. Similarly, sort of inside baseball, obvious but not, we are closing out, we're putting an increased emphasis on closing out our projects. So we have an obligation for $1 million, and it's laying on the books. We've spent $900,000 of it, And until we close that out, that 100,000 is blocked. So we're putting an emphasis on closing all these contracts that have been sitting around and getting the current ones closed quickly so that that puts any available money back into our construction system. We know that generates at least 20 million a year, and my friend here is committed that he thinks he can find another 15 million, but we don't tell you about that. So we think there is a significant amount of money annually for a while. This is not a long-term proposition, but for a while, that'll generate money back into construction. And then finally, my number 2 item on here is this, an initiative we started last spring. It's called Practical Design, which is a good name for it. We've branded it as Open Roads. The idea is that we're going for minimalist instead of gold-plated. And my favorite story is I live near State Route 32, just east of Lebanon. And if you drive down from my place, you drive over to Lebanon. We've done a lot of work over the recent years on roads, on bridges. So you drive down 32, which has virtually no shoulder. You drive down 32, and you hit one of these new bridges, and it just widens out. And then as soon as you get past the bridge, it comes back in. Now, I would tell you State Route 32 and that leg is probably not, in many of our lifetimes, going to get widened. Had we stayed with the initial footprint of those bridges that did need to be repaired, had we stayed with the initial footprint, it would have saved a lot of money. That's practical design, is trying to retain the footprint without doing extraordinary things, solving the problem, not the desire necessarily. We've identified, we're 6 months in, and the projects that we've put through this process have far exceeded our expectations. We've found 40-some-odd million of savings of existing projects, which we've now re-engineered to take advantage of. So it's about 25% of the population today that is generating that savings. Now, as time moves on, you won't see this as savings because we're baking that into our standard processes. One of the significance to you as legislators is people tend to want to come to NDOT with solutions. I want a Super 2 highway. I want a 4-lane. And we're going to look at it and say, what's the right footprint to solve the problem, which is not going to satisfy some people. But that's the idea of open roads. The idea of open roads is do what you have to do to solve the problem, not create a gold-plated solution. Okay, real quickly. Our priorities, Governor Pence has said to us, take care of what you have, finish what you started, and plan for the future. In addition to that, within the purview of NDOT's responsibilities is what I call regional non-strategic needs. You can go anywhere in the state, and there's somebody that's got a good project, makes sense in a lot of ways for that area. It's not strategic to state transportation, but it is desirable to the community. And so I would tell you those 4 things are the buckets of money that we ought to look at. And then you have to worry about, because it's not in our purview, you also have to worry about the needs of the local governments, because I'm not counting that in any of the conversation we've had. So let me talk about priorities now. How are we spending? First, we do a biennial survey of real taxpayers. We hire an outside company. It's a statistically accurate form of solicitation. And here's what they tell us. The most important things to your constituents and our customer is repairing and maintaining the existing highways, removing snow and ice, and repairing and maintaining bridges. So we've taken that as gospel as part of our preservation initiatives. We've taken that as gospel and said that's what we're going to focus our energies on and our priorities in the context of take care of what we have. Now you can see there's other stuff in here that's on that survey and how people ranked it. And this has been consistent over 4 years, 2 surveys. The results of these have been relatively consistent. I alluded to this a little while ago. The problem, ladies and gentlemen, that we're trying to solve is an aging infrastructure problem, period. And this picture shows you that half of the bridges in the state are older than 50 years old on a 75-year life cycle. So what I would encourage you to consider is, it isn't a crisis today, but it can become one. And we've got enough runway today that if we can figure out together the right ways to address it, I don't think our brethren over in the east are going to fix it for us. So if we can figure out how to do this, we've got enough runway that we don't have to do it as a crisis. So our priorities are take care of what we have, finish what we started, plan for the future, and that means that I've ignored the regional non-strategic projects. There's not funding in here to deal with those. In the context of finish what we started, those projects you can see on this picture, the Ileana Expressway is one of those projects. We have it laid out as funded. It was part of the monies Dan showed you that was in one of the, in the Major Moves Construction Fund, is where we've tagged this to be done. At this juncture, we don't know, with the change of administration in Illinois, we don't know where he's going to fall off on the Ileana, and we've made a commitment that we're not going to build a road to nowhere. So we're going to synchronize our activities on this with where we think they're going to come out. We're on track today to get the formal record of decision this month, and now we just need to make sure that Illinois is going to be on board with their funding activities. The Ohio River bridges are, both elements are on track, both elements being Louisville and the East End. East End is scheduled to come online at the end of 16, and the Louisville component, the new bridge in Louisville, is scheduled to come online probably about May of 16.
Carl, you indicated to the press that that the tolls down there weren't going to be able to cover our cost in that project. Can you elaborate on that just a little bit? I'm not sure if I understood that.
So
Well, I've said that too, but
here's the facts. We think, so the first several years will not be covered by tolls.
okay,
Our worst case scenario is that it'll take 6 years, so 2023, to break even.
okay,
Best case scenario is 3 years.
okay. So, but after a period of time, it should build into a sustaining process.
That's what we hope.
And
There's a-
so did we plan to cover the front end of that with our estimates of where we're going to find money to pay for this?
We have built that into our 5-year plan
Okay.
as part of the allocation of the monies we think we're
Yeah.
going to have.
Well, that is a quite a bit different statement than what they printed.
Yes, it is. It's, right now, it's manageable.
Okay,
Now, the variables in that, first of all, we haven't set the tolls.
right?
You all have probably heard some of the stuff I hear, which is all the people that are saying, well, I can't afford the tolls for this reason, or
Right.
that. All those haven't weighed in yet.
Right.
So one of the variables is how much are we really going to collect?
Remind me, Kendra, who makes that decision?
There is a joint board comprised of folks from Indiana.
Yeah. Is the board composed of people that are going to be responsible enough that they're going to make it pay for itself?
Carl and I are the Indiana representatives.
Oh, good. That's a real good admission on your part.
And one of the two of us is a real cheapskate.
Well, you know where we stand, so,
So the governor has committed also in terms of finish what we started is to continue the work on US 31.
right.
The idea being to get it to be interstate type from border to border. We do not have funds to do that,
Yeah.
period.
That's
We may
good.
have some money that we can advance it a bit, but we're looking into that now, but it's not going to get done in that fashion, at least with the money that we know about today.
Okay.
And then I-69, Section 5 is starting construction.
Yeah.
Section 4, which is from Crane to Bloomington, Section 4 is scheduled to come online at the end of 15. It is at risk. We count it as a yellow warning because it's right at the end of the construction season for 2015. It's right at the end of the construction season, so any delays will push it into the following year. Section 5 should come online towards the end of 16. Section 6, we've just initiated the necessary environmental work for determining the final route and determining the final costs. So as it sits today, what we're doing on these, finish what we started, is making sure that on I-69, we do not have known money to construct Section 6. The
So
best
if we
we can do is take it to the point of, this is what it should look like and what we think it'll cost.
So if we want to deal with the vagaries in that issue and the statutory language you have that's kind of restrictive about some of that stuff, we really don't have the 5 years to make up our mind about how we're going to.
That's right, because just the environmental work is going to take 2 years, maybe 3.
Yeah.
And then we've got to decide how or if we're going to fund it.
Okay.
Okay. I told you the East End Bridge for the Ohio Bridges is supposed to come online at the end of 16, and we're anticipating tolling start in 17.
Okay.
Major Moves 2020, you all appropriated past, I don't know what the right word is, but you provided $400 million. $200 million has been released. We are somewhere around $150 million this month as being let obligated. And then there's another letting due for the first tranche, the first $200 million. There's another letting in April or May that would complete the projects of the first part of the Major Moves 2020 money. And we are not doing much relative to the second tranche until we know whether that money is going to become available.
So what are those red marks on that map next to that slide?
Those are the projects of 2020.
Okay.
I'm going to show you, I've got a list of the projects on the next couple
Okay.
of slides.
All right. All right.
So that we can keep honest with what we told you we would do.
All right.
And I'm not going to read them to you, but this is the first tranche. These are all except one should be obligated by the end of this month, and then we'll do the other obligation next month. If the Budget Committee agrees to the second $200 million, which is this list right here, we would begin executing on it with the estimated completion dates that you see on the side here. And that is the total of the $400 million. We're not using other money, we're just using the $400 million. In terms of futures, we're blessed, actually. The Blue Ribbon Panel, which I think is a wonderful look at the world because of the kinds of people that participate in it. We have a good business view of what the needs from a new transportation point of view are. So now we don't have any money to build any of it. But there is, at least in the rumor agenda, there's a lot of noise that says, well, because as you can see, 65 and 70 widening are a big part of this. There's a lot of noise that says, well, if we put truck lanes on I-70, we could toll them. Or I know when we've talked about what used to be called the Commerce Connector, we'll now call it Prince. Did you get it? we've seen various sets of numbers that would suggest some or all of that facility could be tolled, but none of them are decision-type estimates. So we've contracted, and it started now, we'll have the results in the summer. We've contracted with Cambridge Systematics to develop on all of these facilities revenue and traffic analysis that would tell us in a decision-making form that would tell us if we could toll them to build it. In which case, if the answer is yes, we would have a credible source of funding, and therefore we could proceed with the environmental work. If it says no, or parts of it, I mean, so there's variations of this, but my point is, we don't have money today. The only possibility is if some of this could fit into the P3 category, and the only way that would be supportable is if the tolling is sustainable, that it covers the cost of the deal. And then finally, just challenges, opportunity, changes. You all have alluded to it, motor fuel taxes and the situation with the consumption of motor fuels is a big deal. Not in this biennium, a lot. Not in probably the next biennium. But by then, it will become really important that we've figured this out. We had a bad problem with shortfall, as Dan mentioned a little bit earlier. You all resolved that problem in HB 1001 in 2013, and that has made us capable of using state money to match for federal funds without consuming additional federal funds, which is what we were doing before. I've gone through the issues with sustainability of roads and bridges. That remains a subject that all of us ought to be paying attention to. And construction inflation, which is sort of the converse or the corollary to the motor fuel tax, is we're operating on fixed income, buying power is declining. Declining buying power means we're going to get less of the projects that we need for the money that we have. And those are real problems. They're not crises, but they are real problems, and we should be working on them. We are working on them. I'm hoping we can persuade you to work on them.
Okay. Thank you. That's a very thorough presentation. You've used up 1 hour of your 45 minutes.
But this is a hearing. Sorry about that.
Questions and comments from committee. Chairman Brown.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate all this and appreciate the job trying to go forward. Had a concern about design and projects a little bit, specifically to utilities. Have you had conversation with people related to their concern and their question?
The utility people?
Yes, telecommunication and utilities, and is there right-of-way issues, and can we design in maybe some right-of-way issues into the project? Would that add a lot of cost to projects?
Well, so there's some red herrings in all of that. The fact of the matter is we do permit, not permit, we do permit the use of right-of-way for utilities on a demand basis. So if a utility wants part of our right-of-way, they can apply for it, and we, as long as it fits some parameters, we generally grant it. And typically those are relatively local, where they need to cross one of the roads or something of that nature. The other place that we've heard noise is particularly from the telecommunications, and particularly one in particular, that our standards for use of our facilities as transit for the utility conduits. So they use our bridges and run their conduits over it. And there's two sides of that coin. One is we're fairly rigid about it, and so it creates a problem, particularly in southern Indiana, where there's a lot of ups and downs. And we are working with them to try to find ways to do it. But we also have the problem of them not being responsive to our needs You know, if we're going to reconstruct a bridge and they've got a conduit running on that bridge, we tell them they got to move it, and if they take forever, that bridge doesn't get done. So it's an ongoing effort. We work very hard. We've got a whole group dedicated to working with all the utility industries to try to smooth that out.
I think it's an issue we'll need to continue to have conversation on. And then I guess lastly, the Blue Ribbon Commission, that you're going to have a recommendation at the end of this coming summer in 15, which would mean it wouldn't be ready for legislative proposal until session 16, correct?
Well, first, the Blue Ribbon Panel already did their deal. What will be done next summer, before the next legislative session, will be the funding analyses for the opportunities and how to tie those to the construction problems, as well as the P3 analysis. That's what will be next summer. So what you will have going into the next legislature is that set of facts.
Yeah, I guess I have just from a political myopic, is that it's hard for fee increases and tax increases in a short session prior to an election coming up.
In my personal opinion,
If you had it now, it'd be better to include in discussion that we're going to have in 15.
our strategy is to get that in front of you so you have time to evaluate and make decisions, not to try to jam it into the next session.
Yeah, but I'm concerned we're going to need to start to do something, and I'd rather kind of do it in the budget cycle discussion as a.
Well, part of it could be figuring out and agreeing on a strategy. I mean, to me, you know, we go through these cycles where, like, take the Major Moves 2020. So it got to be very, very specific about what it was going to do and what the legislature would support. Now, that's fine, but it's not the way to design transportation systems. So a strategy might be to create, and I'm making this up as I go, but it might be to create a strategy that says, what I want is a way to pay for preservation, and you'll have data next year to know that. And I want another kind of strategy to deal with some of the stuff that shows up in Tier 1, and perhaps even another form to deal with like the regional type needs, so that we can deal with the problem. And if we can lay that out in a way that is a little more difficult to upend later, then you can tackle the problem by how you put money in those buckets.
Okay.
Anyway, that's just a thought.
Senator Tallien and then Senator Broden.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I have two questions
Then you'll do better than I did.
then that I am just going to take this opportunity to ask you about. A couple of things. My first question is, I have heard from a number of local government entities that there have been occasions when INDOT had said, oh, we want to turn this section of highway or this bridge back to, we want to get rid of it, we want to turn it back to a local community. Is that something that you're doing as an active policy?
No, but, comma, there are segments of roads that do make sense in some aspect for local control rather than state control. We don't do a good job in urban areas. That's not our thing. And so to the extent that some of these highways that are in urban areas could be operated better by the locals, we think that's a good idea. Now, the problem is money. And so that was the but, comma. We're not going to spend money on those relinquishments unless they move the needle of performance.
Unless they, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Unless they move the needle of performance. So if it made sense if we were to relinquish a piece of highway and that would cause our condition ratings to improve in the system, then we'd entertain it. But they're going to be really hard to do in the future because of what I showed you of how we're spending money. We don't have the money to do the relinquishments for the prices that locals want to do. We'll still entertain it, we'll still talk to them, but it's going to be really hard to do them in the future.
All right. The second thing that I wanted to ask you about is just a little newspaper article that I read a few months ago about signage on the highways. Businesses pay money to put their names and logos, oh, Mickey D's at the next exit or whatever. And that Indiana is actually getting a very, very small percentage of that contract amount. Can you comment on that?
Sure.
I assume you know what I'm talking about.
I do. So by way of history, that started back in 1988 at no cost to the state of Indiana. That's when that began. And where we sit today is that got renegotiated, I think in 2012. And I had an independent review after all that garbage in the paper. I had or on the news. I had an independent review done to see, are we getting a fair shake and where does it go? And I concluded out of that while today we're at the lower end, if you look at this in 2017, which is when it switches over to the newly negotiated, we get more to the middle of the pack when you do this comparison to others. And there is an opportunity as it would relate to non-interstate where we can really increase the amounts of money that the state of Indiana can get back from that. So what I would say to you is we got a fair deal right now. It's not great, it's fair. And we have a tremendous upside if we can figure out how to deal with the off-interstate type facilities. So do the same kinds of things on US 30 or US 41 or those type of things.
So these contracts have been renegotiated and the new.
Since 1988.
Yeah, but but you're saying something new in 2017?
That's the renegotiation. In 2012, it was renegotiated. The fees go up in 2017.
Senator Broden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, thank you both for the presentation, and I also want to applaud you for some of the creative mechanisms that you mentioned. I think you mentioned the sale of excess property and some other things that you're doing to try to spread our dollars a little further. I don't serve on the Transportation Committee, so maybe these debates are, raging, and I'm not aware of it. But we get a lot of Michigan news up where I am, and Governor Snyder has this plan up in Michigan to raise $1.4 billion through a significant increase in the motor fuel tax. And I paid $2.53 this morning for gas. Very excited about
Being 36 cents of tax.
Absolutely, and was happy to do so. I enjoyed my new US 31 roadway. Came all the way through on 31 this time. But in any event, just wondering. I mean, I'm certainly not looking to get you in any trouble with your boss or anything like that. But it just seems like the answer is somewhat obvious. We haven't raised this motor fuel tax since 2002. I guess is it even on the table from the administration standpoint, or?
So I'm going to answer a different question. But the fact of the matter is, if you go after fuel tax like Michigan is going after, that's a death spiral. You can't get out of that easily because I think they're talking, 12 cents a gallon or something like that? And you lay that on top of what we're going to see very soon is a steep decline in the consumption of motor fuels, and it's an unindexed number. So their legislature is going to say, got that done, and they're going to be back at the table then in a few years because it's going to be a big problem. There isn't enough motor fuel to support that taxation system, period. And that's why I say we need to be looking at a strategy because obviously in the short term, if you want, now I would still tell you, you can have what I described as outcomes, and it's not awful, with the current situation that we have.
Representative Klinker. Was that enough of an answer, Senator Broden?
It's probably the best thing.
Okay.
I'm not advocating to the governor that he increases gas tax because I think it's a mistake to do that today.
Representative Klinker.
Well, I'm going to piggyback what he said.
Go ahead.
I hope you don't mind, because that is the one area I have to tell you, when I ask questions on my survey, Carl, that is the one area where people say, tax me, believe it or not. For their roads, transportation, and bridges, I have never gotten a negative answer on raising the gas tax. Now, that is a specific area, and maybe West Lafayette is a little bit different than some other areas, but I do ask that question on every survey, and the closest I've come to negativity was 51% 49, 51% for. But it's usually 60-40, that they are willing to pay a small increase in whatever you deem important in order to have our roads and bridges taken care of. And maybe that's just my area, but that's one area where people really feel that their money is being used wisely. I have to.
So I would point you at the charts that I showed you earlier. Do you want to be here, or do you want to be here? The spread between them is, in roads and bridges, is somewhere between $200 and $300 million, which is 10 cents a gallon or so on today's consumption. And it will, and that, like I said, that's a death spiral. So is a small increase 10 cents a gallon? Right. Offline, I'll tell you the story about my barber on that subject.
Representative Cherry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Carl, I appreciate the planning for strategies because I know currently the 18 cents a gallon that we have on gasoline tax, driving 20,000 miles a year at 25 miles per gallon, we're paying less than $250 for the infrastructure that we enjoy. And we need to get that story out that we need to find other ways, because as cars get better mileage, consumption is going to be less, and it's not going to keep up with inflation. So it's very important to plan that strategy, and sooner than later. The thing I was wondering, if many communities have been involved with the swap dollars, that with legislation we passed a couple of years to allow locals to swap dollars at 75% with the state.
We've had 5 projects that have taken advantage of that. We've allocated internally, we've allocated 15 million a year to support that, which isn't a whole lot of money in that regard. 15 million being, we have to pay for that split out of state funds. So we have to be real careful about how much of that we're willing to do. But with trade, I mean, that's not a bad trade.
It's a win-win situation
If the money's there.
right.
That's right. So we have to be judicious about it, because we don't have an open bank account.
Right, and I know we have needs, other needs of transportation like railroads and airports, and I think the Blue Ribbon panels had that this summer too. And do you have any suggestion how we're going to meet the needs of what they need?
Right. I'd like to point out that of our $1.7 billion budget, 95% of that is statutorily required to be spent on highways and roads and bridges.
Okay, thank you.
Not on mass transit, not on any other really cool things.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments? Thank you for a very thorough presentation, Carl. Always appreciated. Lot to work on. The Department of Toxicology here.
And yes, sir, the Department of Toxicology is here. Yes, I am, sir.
We didn't select everybody.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I want to thank you for the opportunity to discuss Department of Toxicology, our budget request, and I would like to highlight some of our achievements and explain where we're at, reference our backlogs / turnaround times. Before I do get started, I'd like to introduce the Deputy Director of the agency, Mr. Steve Mayer, and next to him is Dr. Sheila Arnold. She is our toxicologist quality assurance manager for the agency. For discussion purposes, I'd like to divide the department into two areas, breath testing and analytical laboratory. And I'll start by discussing the breath test area first. And I realize that is not an area that you brought up, sir, but it is one of the major areas of the agency that we were tasked with trying to rectify when we became a state agency. In September 2009, Intoximeter Inc. delivered 250 Intox ECIR2 breath test instruments to the then Department of Toxicology. In 2012, the current Department of Toxicology began the process of formulating new testing procedures, with the new administrative rule being started through the promulgation process in 2013. The promulgation process was completed February of this year, and the following month, in March of 2014, the first training sessions for the existing breath test operators using the new instrument began. From March through September of this year, 83 training sessions were held, with 4,370 current breath test operators being recertified using the Intox ECIR2 instrument. This process could not have been possible without the support of the Law Enforcement Academy, who scheduled all of the individuals for each of the sessions, and for different organizations or agencies within the state. Free space was provided to the agency for the training by the Indiana State Police and NDOT at the District 52 complex for the Indianapolis training, Indiana University Northwest for the training at Gary, Ivy Tech for the training at Fort Wayne and Columbus, and Vincennes University for the training at Vincennes. During this training period, we also started the deployment of the new instruments. From April through October of this year, 206 DataMaster instruments were replaced with the new Intox ECIR2s. This now has made the new instrument the primary evidentiary instrument for Indiana for breath testing. In October, 2 months ago, we had our very first new operator school for using the new instrument, followed by another school in November. Between the two schools, we trained approximately 70 new breath test operators, and it's our plan to continue this process, and in 2015 we'll hold between 10 and 15 schools continuing the training. During this time period, we also had training sessions for prosecutors, some judges, and some defense attorneys. Another area in the breath testing program or area is the ignition interlock devices. And as you are well aware, the last legislative session gave the department a new mandate to promulgate a rule reference certifying ignition interlock devices. We are currently working on drafting such a rule at this time. Moving on to the laboratory services. Staff turnover and instrument downtime has had a negative effect on the analytical services. And that negative effect is affecting our backlog or turnaround time. The current budget request contains a change package to increase the forensic scientists' salaries so their compensation will be more competitive with the public and the private sectors. This is being done to help stabilize our analytical staff. Without analytical staff, the ability to do casework and to have cases turned around in an adequate time is not possible. Okay. Instrumentation, I'd like to divide this into two sub-areas, one for drug analysis and the other for alcohol analysis. Instrument downtime is being addressed by funds through the Department of Administration to purchase a new GCMS. This is an instrument for drug analysis, and a time-of-flight instrument. This is for drug screening. Currently, we're using ELISA technology for our drug screening. This lease will expire at the end of 2015, and we're already preparing for the replacement of that, moving towards time-of-flight. We have also submitted a grant request to the Criminal Justice Institute to replace a 15-year-old GCMS. This instrument had been down for over 100 days this year, and received word this morning that our grant request has passed through the committee and is moving on towards final approval. We're also talking to Criminal Justice Institute about additional funds to increase our alcohol capacity by purchasing an additional Headspace GC. This is the instrument used for alcohol analysis, and to replace two of our older Headspace instruments. It should be noted that as we receive these new instruments, they will have to go through a validation period before they can be used with casework. And this may slow us down some in the short run as scientists are assigned to do this validation. But it will improve our capacity and turnaround time for the future. Backlogs and turnaround times themselves, excuse me. In October of 2013, the agency saw the worst, the highest, the greatest, whatever terminology you wish to use, backlogs and turnarounds since we became a state agency. The department has concentrated on training new hires in the area of alcohol analysis, since 52% of our cases contain alcohol requests, and on training scientists in THC or marijuana analysis, since 40% of our drug requests contain marijuana. At the end of October of this year, we had 1,238 pending alcohol cases. This compares to 2,110 cases in October of 2013, or 873 less cases. Also, currently, we have no alcohol analysis request older than 60 days. The drug analysis portion of the laboratory, at the end of October of 14, we had 2,704 drug cases pending analysis, compared to 2,845 in October of 2013, or 141 cases less. Currently, our average turnaround time for drug analysis is basically the same as it was October 2013. About 5 months is where we're at currently. But as we look at turnaround times and we look at backlogs, I think that we need to look at how many cases are being submitted for analysis as well. In 2012, we averaged 500 new cases a month. In 2013, this rose to 560 cases a month. And this year so far, we've averaged 609 cases per month, or since 2012, 109 more cases a month on average, a 20% increase. This sounds like a lot, but it also tells me that our agency is doing things properly, and we're doing them right, and we're moving forward in that area. We're also trying to improve the workflow of the laboratory, to improve our turnaround times by changing the way drug analysis occurs. In the past, scientists were trained on a limited number of drugs or drug classifications. When someone would leave, that analysis would cease until someone else was hired or retrained. We're changing this by cross-training our scientists to do multiple analyses and by creating new test methods. We have always had the capacity to screen for multiple drugs. simultaneously. Now we're moving to do this with the confirmation phase as well. We're trying to create methods where multiple drugs can be confirmed at the same time. And in the past, for comparison, we had about 10 different methods for confirmation depending on the drug or drug classification. In the future, we'll have 4 to 5 different methods, reducing the amount of training necessary and reducing the amount of time it takes to bring a scientist on board. As well as if a scientist leaves, becomes ill, is on vacation, analysis will not cease just because that person is not there, but someone else will be able to do the work. Another area that we're working towards in the analytical as well as the breath test area is accreditation. We plan to seek accreditation from the American Board of Forensic Toxicology, ABFT, and ISO accreditation through the American Society of Crime Laboratory Directors Laboratory Accreditation Board, or ASCLD Lab. ABFT will be specific to toxicology in the laboratory, while ASCLD Lab will accredit both the lab and the breath test program. I feel, and the agency believes, that accreditation is essential and necessary as we move forward. We're working on rewriting all of our manuals to reflect our current operations and putting them into ISO and ASTM formatting. Our goal is to have our documents in order so that we can seek accreditation by ABFT by the end of 2015 and to seek ISO accreditation by the end of 2016. We also plan to continue the process of increasing our transparency, and our test methods, training manuals, quality assurance manuals, when they have been rewritten, will be placed on our website for all to see, including prosecutors, defense attorneys, and the public. We also plan on conducting surveys in the future to evaluate the agency's responsiveness and quality of service. And at this point, I'm going to deviate a little bit here before closing because I want to talk about the ability to produce results for court. We have incorporated what is called iResults this year. That began in April of 2014. And what that is that all of our analytical reports are available online to the contributors and the prosecutor. A certain agency can only see their reports. A prosecutor can see all the reports in their county. What this has done is that a report is now available the day after it is completed, instead of waiting for the mail to deliver our results. This is one way that we're trying to improve our turnaround time and get the information, the results, into the hands of those who have requested the analysis. Another way that we try to produce results in a timely fashion is we prioritize our cases. If a case comes in involving a death, sexual assault, involvement with a child, those are automatically prioritized. We also prioritize cases at the request of a prosecutor or depending on severity or sometimes even the political aspects of a case. As an anecdotal example, within the last month, we had a prosecutor contact us. He was dealing with a case where there was a death and driving while intoxicated and injuries. There was a hearing coming up within a week, and he asked what he could do to get results. He also asked the agency how best to handle the evidence that he had. Through conversations with Dr. Arnold and Dr. Rainey, our laboratory supervisor, myself, we directed the prosecutor on how best to package the evidence, how to get it submitted to us in a timely fashion, how best to determine what samples needed to be analyzed, and we had his results within less than a week, prepared for him to go to a trial, to the hearing. So if a request comes in for a rush, we will react to it. If the case is negative, if it's requested for drug analysis and alcohol and both are negative, we can turn that case around very quickly. If it's requested just alcohol, all alcohol analysis is being conducted in-house. We're outsourcing none of those cases currently. We can prioritize that case and get it resolved immediately. If it contains drugs, then it depends on the type of drugs. We're currently doing THC and cocaine analysis in-house. All other drugs that we test for or screen for, we're outsourcing at this point in time. We have had cases where we've outsourced the case and we contact the laboratory that we're sending the cases to, and we request the prioritization, and they do that for us. So the communication is the real key. If prosecutors and agencies talk to us about court dates, talk to us about the type of case, we can produce results very quickly. If the case is strictly a driving while impaired and it's a drug case, then it goes in as first come, first out. So we're trying to prioritize and use the system to give the best results we can until we can get to where we want to be. And now our goal, of course, is 30-day turnaround for alcohol with the ideal of 15 days, and for drug analysis, 45 days with the ideal of 30 days. So in closing, I wish to thank everyone who has assisted the Department of Toxicology since it became a state agency, including the Governor's Office, legislative body, State Budget Agency, Department of Administration, Criminal Justice Institute, Law Enforcement Academy, and many, many other people who would take, and organizations who would take way too long to mention individually. But it's because of the support that we have had that we're where we're at today.
Sounds like you're aware of the issues that have been brought to my attention, and you've been doing a lot of things to try to address them. And so that's very reassuring, and I appreciate that explanation. You've done a lot of training on the alcohol testing, and then you've apparently reduced your wait list quite a bit in that regard. And the other drugs, you haven't changed the metric a lot, but your caseload has increased in the meantime, and you are aware of it. And so in your budget request, you say you're requested some additional funds to cover the types of people you need in order to be able to execute your mission. And I think our concern is to make sure that you're being responsive to the needs of what your department's supposed to satisfy. And then do you have the ability to do that? And it sounds like you have a plan. It sounds like you're making progress. And I guess the last question would be, does this budget request, do you think that gets you in the position where you need to be in order to be able to get to your announced objectives here on the wait list and the times and all those issues?
I believe that the appropriations requested are what we need at this time.
Okay.
We're going to continue trying to find areas where we can reduce spending
Yeah.
and reallocate resources. As we bring scientists on board and do more analysis in-house, we'll do less outsourcing.
Sure.
And those funds then can be used for supplies and instrumentation.
Well, you're a support agency for the criminal justice system, and a new agency that's been designed to provide a sort of a wall of integrity here so that we can trust this process. And so our function is just to make sure that this is working and that we're all on the same page there. Are the other questions of committee members? Yes, Chairman Brown.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess kind of follow up on that. I mean, Chairman Kenley, talked about things anecdotally. Do you have feedback from the courts and the officers regularly? Is there a kind of a survey done periodically about how you're doing and how responsive, you are, quote, to your customer, so to speak?
We have not put a survey in place at this time. We plan to do so because that's the only true way that you can get feedback across the contributors and prosecutors. But I will say that we've had 35 new agencies submit cases to us this year that did not submit to us last year.
We have a customer base that's widely expanding.
It is expanding, and it's coming back to us. We've had agencies talk to us that have not used us in the past. Marion County Coroner's Office has met with us. and they plan on starting to use our services. So I think the credibility's out there. I think what we're trying to do, people understand, and for the most part, we have seen people very tolerant of our turnaround times when we have that opportunity to speak with them and to communicate. We're looking long-term to bring this agency around where we feel it needs to be. And in the short term, sometimes we're not as responsive as people would like us to be. So we have to use a way of prioritizing cases. We have to use outsourcing. We have to be innovative in our ways to get those results to our clients, our contributors.
Brian, it sounds like the budget agency is kind of aware of the issues too, and you've tried to help in that regard.
Yeah, absolutely. We've tried to make sure that toxicology, one, got funds for the current biennium and this was not in the governor's recommended budget in 2013, but their funding was from the general fund, and then a later version of the budget, I think, switched them to a dedicated fund that didn't have enough, or didn't have sufficient resources in it, so we've got that corrected. We're going to have them back on the general fund for the next biennium, and we've given them additional resources to make sure that they can keep the employees at the quality level they need to get their job done.
Okay. Well, I appreciate your attention to that matter. I think that's important. Other questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much for a good report. We appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
Keep up the good work. Make some progress out there. Come in the next time with meet all those goals. I'm sure that'll solve all these issues that we're concerned about.
Absolutely. Solve the world's problems.
There you go.
As we meet one goal, we find another one to take its place.
Well, we appreciate your work.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Next, we have everybody's favorite department, the Department of Revenue. Mike, how are you today?
Good.
Good.
I'm very good, thanks. I'm recovering from a knee surgery I had.
Oh,
recently, so
wow.
That's why I'm carrying a cane. It's not to get anybody's attention.
I thought that was, I thought you were trying to get the sympathy vote today.
I do enough of that, exactly. But really appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. I do have a PowerPoint presentation that I'd kind of like to use to guide through it. And seated next to me, on my left, though, is my right-hand person, is Valerie Hunt, our CFO at the Department of Revenue, who's done an outstanding job. So again, Chairman Kinley and committee members, it's a pleasure to be with you, and thanks for the opportunity. Likewise, I'd like to share some highlights on kind of the most recent year that we've gone through, and really talk about some additional priorities and agenda items that we have going forward, and seek your continued support, which has really been outstanding. I'll also talk about our long-term technology strategy, because I think that's a very important element of really where we are and how we're going to continue to do the state's work in terms of revenue collection. Our mission and vision have remained the same, and it essentially is to administer the tax laws and collect the revenues, make sure the funding gets to all the appropriate agencies that should, and to provide in an efficient manner tax service to our taxpayers in the state. We do encompass a large revenue stream. We collect about $17.3 billion on an annual basis, working with 4.2 million individual taxpayers, about 210,000 corporate taxpayers, and we will process over 3,250,000 individual tax returns on an annual basis. When you combine that with the monthly filings we get for payroll withholdings and sales tax withholdings, we actually process over 10 million returns on an annual basis, either annual returns or monthly returns. So it's a very high level of volume. We're comprised really of four distinct groups. We have about 720 people that are either employees or contractors within the agency. And the first group is our legal group, which again encompasses our protest, tax policy, and formerly inheritance. We have wound down our entire inheritance department. We had 7 people in that department, and all of those positions have been eliminated. We still are getting about 15 to 20 inheritance cases a month, so there's still some things trickling in, but we're able to handle that within our own staff. Our operations group and lines of business, we have 223 people in that group. That includes our ops center, our motor carrier service, which is an important part of our overall operation and really strategic services to Hoosiers as being a logistics state, as well as our tax advocate and just our overall customer service. Our compliance group's comprised of our audit enforcement group as well as our collections group, and again we've got about 322 people in that group. And then business support, we have 144 people, and that includes really the support groups, finance, PR, HR, our project management office, which is a new group that we put in place following the Deloitte internal controls review, and then of course our information technology, which has continued to be a very important part of our overall support group. So again, it's a great group. Over the last year, we actually also added 12 additional people for our ID theft, and I'll talk more about that later. Other than that, we added about 11 people to our IT group. Beyond that, that really represents the 21 people increase that we had over the prior year. Looking at our individual metrics, we really have three key metrics. The first is measuring the dollars of revenue we receive for every dollar of cost. And we think that's really important because it measures not only the costs that we have and incur, but more importantly, it compares that to the revenue that we generate. So in fiscal 2014, we generated $17.3 billion in revenue and had $71 million in operating costs. So that's about $245 of revenue for every dollar of cost, which we think is pretty important. Now that actually is down from $281 the prior year. And the reason for that is as you know, we responded to the Deloitte Internal Controls and Operating Procedures report and had substantial expenditures associated with that. We've also begun a number of capital expenditures related to ultimately replacing the returns processing system. And again, I'll talk more about that in the end. If you were to back those expenditures out and compare the 71 million, that number would actually be 57 million in terms of operating costs, and that ratio would have been $303.51. So again, we're investing for the future. We're dealing with some of the technology deficiencies that we know are in place and will continue to do. Our second KPI is measured by, on a rolling 12-month basis, the amount of money we collect from delinquent taxpayers. And yes, we have delinquent taxpayers in this state, more than we would like to have. We saw some great improvements there, increasing about 35%. We collected $223 million in delinquent taxes this last year compared to $165 million. We made a lot of improvements in this area with enhanced accounts receivable reporting, which we've put in place. We consolidated our third-party collection efforts. We have done an increased interaction with sheriffs and other third-party collection tools that we're working with across the state. Much more aggressive collection efforts from our field audit group. We're now using a tool called a 5-day posting that if we have a taxpayer, particularly for trust taxes, if after multiple attempts to get their attention and to get them to pay what they've reported they owe, they still have not, we will actually post them with an orange sign and rescind their retail merchant certificate. And it's amazing the impact that has. That gets their attention. So that has really helped our field collection efforts dramatically. Finally, we put in place or exercised an exhausted liability project and collected over $12 million from that. That represented, in the past, we kind of had the theory that if we tried to collect for about 15 months and we didn't collect, we kind of put it in the exhausted category and we gave up on you. And we're now proving that we're not giving up, and we're going to continue to pursue those that are not compliant. And you can see the results. We would anticipate continued, probably not 35%, but certainly some continued increases in this. You can just see kind of where it all stands. You can see it's across all tax types, but particularly the individual income tax, our withholding tax, and sales tax, both the trust taxes. So it's really about 50-50 between the two in terms of where that dramatic increase has taken place. But you can see a 35% increase overall the prior year, and 74% from our third-party collection and our sheriffs working with our third-party partners. The third KPI that we utilize to measure is the success you have when you call our department to get customer service. Do you get through? Now that's a pretty simple measure, but we really were struggling with that in the past. So we've had some nice improvement. Our threshold is 85%. This year, we were able to achieve 88.6 and are continuing to strive to increase that. And again, this represents our promise to the taxpayers that when they call in and have a problem, that we're going to be able to help them. We know if they actually reach a live person using our 4-point customer service program, we will be able to, for the most part, address their needs. And so we've seen some success there. We just recently, just here in November, upgraded our CIC system to 4.0, so we now actually have that, should see even improved results on that front. Just looking at the customer service that we have 12 district offices across the state. I make it a point to make sure I visit all of those district offices each year, and not only visit with our staff, but also visit with local practitioners. Yesterday I was in South Bend and had the opportunity to visit with a lot of our CPAs, practitioner friends up there, and get their input. They're still crying about Notre Dame's football program up there, but other than that, they're in pretty good spirits. But this last year, we handled over 750,000 calls, a 19% increase over the prior year. But not only do we have calls, but we have emails, letters of correspondence, and a variety of other types of communications as well, too, as we interact with taxpayers. Remembering, we're processing not just individual income tax returns, but each month, millions of returns for monthly withholdings and things of that nature. We have had really some nice thresholds of improvement that allowed us to continue to improve our efficiency. Electronic filing has been a wonderful thing for Department of Revenue and really for mankind, but we've seen a dramatic increase in individual income tax filings electronically. And this last year it was over 81%, up about 2.5%. We see that continuing to grow. Indiana is still a little bit behind the national average of around 86 to 87%. And again, when people prepare the returns, even though they may prepare them and could file them electronically, they don't like to have to pay that $19.95 to the software vendor, Intax or H&R Block or whoever it will be, and so they just send it in via paper. So we've talked to them and asked them to consider giving us a break, but that's one of their revenue streams. If you look on the next slide, our trust taxes, which again are monthly payroll withholdings, again, I appreciate the support that you all provided us in doing the e-file mandate, which has had a dramatic impact in improving accelerating collections, improving our efficiency. And so we have seen a huge increase. Right now we're getting well over 90% of our monthly filings being done electronically, which improves not only the accessibility and the time we receive that money and get it put to work, but it also dramatically allows us to realize whether a taxpayer has paid or filed timely. In the past, it would oftentimes take us 3 to 4 weeks for the mails to clear, for us to process the coupons and get all the records reflected before we knew whether a taxpayer had paid or not paid. Now we were able to know the day after it's due whether they have. As a result of that, we've actually been utilizing email to make contact with those taxpayers, and ones that did not pay or did not file timely, we are sending them a reminder, just letting them know that we did not receive it. So we've seen a dramatic improvement in the collection. We've also seen a dramatic reduction in our BIAs, or business or best information availables, which are those really somewhat egregious notices we send out to taxpayers saying that you didn't send us the money you were supposed to, and that has reduced our costs dramatically. So we're pleased with that. One thing that we're extraordinarily pleased this last year was a major initiative for us was our ID theft and refund fraud prevention. And it's remarkable the level of fraud which is taking place, particularly on individual filings. Overall, for the full year, and again, you see the fiscal year 2014, we identified 14,000 and saved $16 million in refunds. But if you look at the entire 2013 filing season through the end of October, we have prevented $88 million in fraudulent refunds from going out the door. That's money that would have been lost out of state revenue and would be, for the most part, sent to bank accounts and debit cards and other places out of the state and would be lost by the state. So we've been very pleased with that. That represented over 74,000 attempted refund frauds during the course of the year. We think we put a huge dent in that effort, but the fraudsters continue to look for new avenues and new ways to defraud us, and so you'll see in our change package that we'd like to make some continued investment in this initiative, which we think will yield substantially even more savings. just some additional things that we were able to put in place this year. As I mentioned, we had some capital expenditures. Some of that was related to some expenditures we did with a company called RSI that allows us to have completed what we now call our compliance management system. In other words, this is actually a new platform that we have created that is going to allow us to do a variety of analytical and data testing and sharing things to identify where there are fraud or levels of noncompliance. And one of those procedures was looking at a variety of information we were able to pull together from resources within the state as well as external to identify individuals that had income reported or had vehicles registered or property registered in the state of Indiana, but for some reason did not file a tax return in 2011. We identified over 30,000 of those individuals and have been making contact with them, asking them why they did not file and suggesting that perhaps they should. And to date, we've collected over $5 million. We think there's probably at least another $8 to $10 million that we will collect from this process. This is a program and a platform that we'll be able to build on, not just this year for 2011, but we'll be able to do this for every year, and we'll also be able to broaden it to other tax types, and not just individual, but also business, and for monthly filings for sales tax and use tax as well, too. So it's beginning of really a more enhanced compliance initiative that we'll be able to build on, and it's one of the spokes that I'll talk about here in a little bit. Next, some other things. We've been very active on the governor's Cut Red Tape initiative, and we've been doing a regulatory and administrative review, and have already reduced or eliminated over 30 pages of regulations. We also work very closely with OMB and Governor Pence in putting together the Tax Competitiveness and Simplification Conference, and Chairman Kenley and Chairman Brown, you were both really supportive and very helpful in this process, and I think generate some great discussion on precisely some of the tax simplification and competitive ideas we could put forth here. So we're excited about those. We did receive a few items of notoriety from the industry and the public. The Public Relations Society of America noted a couple of our award-winning pieces, particularly the Pinnacle Award for our communication regarding in-tax and the e-file mandate, which was so successful, as well as our annual report. And we also, at the Midwest States Association of Tax Administrators Conference, I was pleased to accept the Innovation Award, again, for the rollout and implementation of our in-tax for the e-file mandate. We also were able to eliminate over 70 standalone technology systems that were not supported and would be outdated. So I think that was another major milestone. So that's some of the things we've been able to do this last year, but let's look forward and say, what are we going to do going forward, in the ensuing year and years to come. As we identified our key challenges, we identified 4 key challenges. The first is recruiting and retaining talented people. I think that is prevalent across all of industry, as well as private industry, as well as state government. But I think we clearly are challenged with that as well too. Our IT modernization efforts, and again, we have a lot of things that we need to focus on and do. We'll be addressing those. Third is protecting taxpayers and the state from further fraud and ID theft. And then fourth is we're very concerned about data security and disaster recovery and how that plays. So keeping those in mind, we've identified our 4 strategic priorities, and they're kind of captured by what we call FACT. The F is for filing simplification, minimizing our regulatory burden for small businesses. A is for accuracy and reliability of filing and reporting. And then this is really a follow-up to the Deloitte report from a couple of years ago, that we have not put that aside and shelved, that we've actually been working very diligently and have over 70% of their recommendations either enacted or underway to address all of the observations that they brought forth. Many of the rest of them are going to rely upon technology replacements and development of an integrated tax system. And again, I'll talk about that in a moment. We're very focused on C of compliance, creating a level playing field. As we look at ways to increase revenue for the state operating budgets and costs, it's not a matter, as you all know, it's not a matter of increasing taxes, and you can only become so much more efficient. Rather, it's a matter of you've got to ensure that the compliance increases, because that's where the dollars really lie. We continue to think there's probably a level of 20% noncompliance across the board, and that's pretty much consistent nationally as well. If you were to factor that into what that means for the state of Indiana, that's probably about $4 billion that we're not collecting. Now, we're not going to be able to get that, but many of the initiatives that we're striving to put in place and technology enhancements are really driven to improve that compliance. So it's getting the taxes, it's getting people to pay the taxes they're supposed to pay, not more, not less. Finally, the T is team development, making sure that we've got the right people in place to do our jobs. Now, within each of these strategic priorities, we have a number of initiatives that we've really identified as must-dos that we want to achieve. These are on top of the ongoing regular performance of the agency that we would expect to achieve. Now, I won't go through each one of these, so don't worry, I'm not going to do that, but I want you to know that under each one of these strategic priorities, I've listed a handful of must-dos, but there's probably another handful of other initiatives that we have underway that are part of our regular operating initiatives and agendas to complete. But all of these will have a direct impact on these strategic priorities, so we won't go through each one. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about our IT strategy long-term and how we're going to deal with the returns processing system. And this slide, if we get to this slide, okay, what I would ask you to consider is you see the box in the middle, and I would please consider that as our returns processing system. And even though it's kind of a shaded blue, it's really a black box. I mean, it's a black box that was created, in the late 90s, and it was custom developed for the state of Indiana by Accenture, and really was state of the art at the time it was done. It was done on a really different format than what we're doing our programming today. It's very complex. It's also a black box from the sense that it's very difficult to penetrate. In other words, you've got to know how to actually open the door to get into that box to start making a lot of changes. So it's very unwieldy, bulky. We do not have really adequate documentation about what all it's there and what it does. Oftentimes it does things that we don't understand why it does. So, but the important element here is it's kind of self-contained. And all the processes that we want to have done are in that black box, and it's very difficult to make changes to individual components within that black box. You also you see the yellow boxes there below. Those are some of our special taxes and other things. But we have a lot of elements of things that we're doing that are absolutely outside of that black box and are not connected in any way. And the only way we get them integrated in is through manual adjustment. So this is a current state look at where we are. Here's where we are planning to go. You can see it is more of obviously it's very circular, but you can see in the green area you have the very core processing elements of an integrated tax system. So that you're going to see the actual taxpayer registration, the returns processing, and taxpayer accounting, which is really the core unit of what the thinking or the brain of that system. And then what you have surrounding that, you have a series of circles that all represent individual elements or components, or what I'd characterize as spokes, that will feed into that core processing system. And then the broader circle then represents really the integrated tax system itself. And our vision is, let's begin building those spokes. In fact, we've already started building those spokes, but each of those spokes can be built, individually in a more managed fashion with less of a direct investment cost, so that as you get more and more of those spokes built, you will be able to go, from that black box, pull out pieces that are being done there and just actually put them in here and have them connect in the meantime, but ultimately are going to be going into that green box. We've already begun the process of building these spokes. So if you look at, for example, the compliance management system, we've already put in place the audit toolkit for our enforcement group, our audit case management, and of course that non-filer program was a key part of that process as well too. We'll continue to build on that compliance management system. And again, we think it's so critical because we think we can impact revenue more directly through increased compliance than anything else. The data warehouse is another spoke that we've already commenced. The fraud spoke in the about 11 o'clock area up there is one that we've already started. Special taxes down in the 7 o'clock point. We just this last week went live with cigarette, alcohol, and other tobacco products on a new system. Eventually, we would see this all driving to become that integrated tax system. This process is going to take a 5 to 7 year time frame to achieve, And we'll be looking, again, to gradually migrate to begin, or build those spokes, which will be able to migrate into that integrated hub at some point in time. By doing this, it dramatically reduces our risk in the sense that, if we, for some reason, a breakdown were to occur and we could not collect taxes, it could have a devastating impact on the state of Indiana's operations. By doing it in this fashion, we're able to really build a spoke at a time, so to speak, so that it dramatically reduces the likelihood or the impact if one of those spokes fails going forward. So wanted you to see that. Again, from a timeline, we're looking at really a 5 to 7 year process. Many of these spokes are going to create efficiencies and the ability to drive additional compliance, so they will be revenue generating initiatives, and again, that will help to offset the cost of that overall program. If we were to go out and do a total replacement of RPS, it would be extraordinarily expensive. It's difficult to say how much, but I'm confident it would be in the well over $100 million to do that. And again, it has a tremendous amount of risk associated with doing so. So I wanted to just share that kind of what our vision is on the integrated tax system, because I know that's a very important thing that many of you have expressed concerns about, and we want you to know that that's something we think about on an ongoing basis as well. For our program investments for 2016 and 17, again, we'd like to continue to focus on the fraud element and continuing to enhance that spoke of our wheel. With an additional cost of $22.5 million, we'll be able to continue the program we've commenced here in 2014 that had great success, but also build on it and add additional analytics and capabilities. And not only will we be using some external third-party services like LexisNexis, which we had, but we will also begin the process of enhancing our own internal analytics and building off of the Management Performance Hub, which we've already, the governor and OMB have put in place, and continue to utilize resources that we have within the state. By doing that, again, we will be able to impact not only the Department of Revenue's compliance capabilities, but we think the same tool will really have applicability to other agencies as well, too, as we're able to, because we know as people are perpetrating fraud against us, they're probably perpetrating fraud against other agencies as well, too, whether it be workforce development or Medicaid, Medicare, or any number of others. This tool could help us address those as well. But not only, there clearly is cost involved, but we think that it will drive in the range of, this year we eliminated $88 million in refund fraud. We think we can increase that to continue to, $150 to $200 million a year of reduced fraud with the enhanced tools that we will be putting in place over the next 2 years of the biennium. So that is our primary program investment that we would seek. In terms of how that breaks out in individual pieces, you can see on the next slide about 10.9, 11.6, and how that breaks out between internal and external. And then finally, just one other change we would ask, and this is really moving from one motor carrier fund to another, is just some funding to accommodate, digital plates. And again, it's really just kind of moving from one motor carrier bucket to another, not a substantial change, but does reflect the increased increased commercial registration that we've had. Again, we've increased the number of commercial vehicles, over-the-road vehicles in Indiana dramatically, and are continuing to be one of the best, the states of choice across the United States for trucking companies to register their vehicles. Finally, just to summarize and really focus on our integrated tax system strategy, we think it is a longer-term initiative. We think it's going to include a number of elements or spokes of that wheel that we want to put in place. In the end, we think that will, again, reduce the risk of implementation, give us a better product, and allow us, to some extent, to pay for it as we go along the way. So with that, I'm very pleased, again, to share the highlights and kind of our strategic priorities and where we're headed, and be happy to try to answer any questions that you may have.
Thanks for a thorough presentation there, Mike. We have questions? Senator Tallien.
Thank you. Mike, can I ask you about your outside third-party collection? I'm looking at the slide that says you collected 223 million in delinquent taxes, and you got 74% of that from collection agents?
Well, no,
is
that would
what
be-
I'm reading?
We had a
slide.
74% increase, yeah. It was 223 million in total that we collected and we really have, our call center are involved with that. We have field collection people, and then we work with sheriffs, counties around the 92 counties around the state, and then we work with Premier, which is our third-party collection agent. So that 74% increase represents the volume or the dollar increase we enjoyed with our sheriffs and and with Premier.
All right, what I'm trying to find out is how much money how much money do you attribute to third-party collection to Premier? And what's the rate that you're paying them for collection?
Yeah, it's about 60 of the 223 million. It's about 60 million, and the rate is around.
We don't have a rate with them. The arrangement that we have is that they bill the person that's delinquent, so there's no cost to the state for them doing the business.
Yeah, there's no cost to the state, so their collection fee is actually added on to what they collect from the taxpayer. So the taxpayer actually collects it, but it is at a rate of, if I remember correctly, around 11%. It's around 11% is the rate, but that is actually paid by the taxpayer, not by us. And again, as we selected Premier, we did go through a thorough bidding process about 2.5 years ago, and that's where we selected Premier based upon a variety of factors, but more importantly the professionalism and the manner in which they interact with taxpayers, the rate that they were going to charge, the success we've had, because we previously had 3 collection agencies that we work with, and we found that to be somewhat burdensome to have 3 separate ones. And so as we went through this process, we elected to consolidate, and feel like that has really had a really positive impact by virtue of seeing that increase.
Thank you.
Representative Klinker?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Alley, when you who puts the signs on the doors of the restaurants or the places that have not paid their taxes? Does the sheriff do that, or does Premier?
It would be us. We would be the ones to do that. So it would actually, typically, it would be one of our field representatives, which is one of our field collection people. We have field collection people in all of our 12 district offices around the state, and they would work with the local law enforcement, typically the sheriff or the police department within the community that they're working with. We really, in fact, we don't mandate, but we strongly encourage. In almost all cases, they do work with the sheriff. We don't want to put our people at risk, because obviously it can be somewhat of a hostile situation.
Well, that's something new in our community, and 2 restaurants shut down immediately because of the sign on their door. And they're nice people. They were popular in downtown, on 10th and Main and 5th and Columbia, right down in the downtown area. And, is there an opportunity for those people to work with you and try to pay it back?
Absolutely.
Slowly?
Absolutely. Our intent is never to close a business in Indiana. I mean, that's the last thing we want to do. And we resort to this 5-day posting and only after we've made multiple attempts to work with the taxpayer is to work out a repayment plan.
You've given them every opportunity before that sign goes up.
Yeah, we do, and we really, it's the last thing we want to do, and we don't seek to do it, and we tell them, and we give them that 5-day letter saying, we're going to come and we're going to do this. So when we come, they shouldn't be surprised, and it really is unfortunate, it's painful, but we know there's an extraordinarily high level of noncompliance on heavy cash businesses, and restaurants fall in that category, and oftentimes, we work with taxpayers that are unfortunately they're undercapitalized. Sometimes they're great people, but they aren't always the best business people.
That's right, and it's something new in our community. So everybody was, the orange sign is there. I think it was an embarrassment to them. So both of them shut down.
Yeah.
Hopefully they'll find a way to open again, but hopefully
we're very flexible. We're very flexible that if we've got a taxpayer that will work with us and work out a repayment plan. We're happy to work out their repayment plan, give them the opportunity to reopen
I appreciate
and
that.
pay it over an extended period of time.
Yeah. Thank you for the collection, so it must be working.
It is.
Other questions or comments? I know that one of the things that you all are talking about is having some authority to be able to settle agreements on your own without using the Attorney General. And I'm a little sensitive about that because of the sort of the checks and balances that provides as a natural course. So I don't think we need to go into that today, but I just wanted to bring that up. And I would appreciate maybe somebody could explain to me why that would be a good idea, or maybe this would be the season if we're going to have a bill on that, if there's an opportunity to discuss with both you and the Attorney General how to structure that. If we could assist in that, maybe that's possible. Maybe you've already tried to do that and it just doesn't work. But anyhow, I'm a little, I'm curious about that issue.
Share some more
Yeah,
information with you.
that'd be great.
Sure.
Sometime. Anything else? Well, thank you, Mike. Good presentation, and I'm glad to see you're tackling the technology issue. I hope that the approach you're taking is the one that succeeds, because it's been hanging over us for a while now.
We've really made a lot of, I mean, I didn't share all, there's a
I'm
lot of
glad to
things we
hear
have
it.
done. There's a lot more to do.
I'm glad to hear it. Thank you.
Thanks.
FSSA, what do they do now? They're on their way. Members, when we do the FSSA discussion today, I would remind you that this is everything in FSSA except Medicaid. We'll be talking about Medicaid separately, and so you'll have a chance to dive in with all of the thorough discussion that you want at that time. We're doing that in conjunction with the Medicaid forecast, so I think that kind of helps, actually. We must have surprised everybody by catching up on our timetable. You know, I didn't ask Mike Alley. I wanted to ask him, but There's Michael. That's a way to make an entrance, Michael. We kind of got caught back up on our schedule. We didn't mean to surprise you here. Well, first off, I should probably welcome Michael back to the scene of the action here. He left FSSA and he's back as a deputy secretary. So we're glad to have you back, Michael. You did a great job before, and I know you're going to be helping us out today. And I advised the committee that we're going to be talking about everything except Medicaid. I hope that's right. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll give you the floor and look forward to your presentation.
For the record, Dr. Warner's visiting South Bend.
Now I'm on, all right. I think I broke the mic. There we go. All right. Okay, Chairman?
We're ready.
All right. Well, good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Michael Gargano, Deputy Secretary at FSSA, and with me is Paul Bowling, who's our CFO. We're here today to give you an overview of the agency and to talk about our state fiscal year 16 and 17 budget request. As you can see, our agency's organized into 6 divisions and offices. We have a budget of about $10.5 billion, and currently our staff levels are just over 4,100. I'd like to highlight a few of the key agency initiatives we have underway. The first, as you know, is On My Way Pre-K. That pilot has begun. We'll be in Allen, Jackson, Lake, Marion, and Vanderburgh counties. There are some eligibility requirements which are listed on the screen. The nice thing is the families are going to have the opportunity to choose from any program from an eligible enrolled provider out of a public, non-public, or community-based setting. Next month, 4 of the 5 counties will begin the program, so all but Jackson. Our provider enrollment began on November the 12th. Family applications started on November the 19th. They're due by mid-December. We plan to have a lottery around the 17th of December to pick those families to receive the grants. We're looking at approximately 350 children who would be enrolled across these 4 counties. So there would be about 90 in Vanderburgh, 100 each in Marion and Lake, and 60 in Allen. We'll repeat this process again in April for that second group of students that we're targeting for, that would begin actually in August of 15.
Mike, I want to interrupt just
Yes,
here
sir.
for a minute since Senator Kenley stepped out. How will we be tracking these 350 students? Will they be assigned their, DOE number that will be able to follow them through the K through 12 process to see how this works?
I'll have Melanie add some specifics to that question, Chairman, but we do plan on, as part of the study that is going to be performed, track and monitor progress from these initial 350, but of course ultimately the 2,000 that would be in the program as they go through the course of their education careers. Let me ask Melanie here if, oh, hi Melanie. Yeah.
Yes, all 350 students within this first enrollment will be issued a student test number.
Okay. And so the control group will be everybody else who didn't do these programs.
The control group will be selected at the start of kindergarten from a group of children.
Thank you.
Okay, the next next initiative I wanted to share was on Hoosier Care Connect. It's a new managed care program which is going to serve a portion of our Medicaid aged, blind, and disabled population. It will include children and adults. The health plans have been selected. We made that announcement last week that would be part of this program. And we start in April of 2015. We're expecting the enrollment to be about 85,000. I apologize, the slide says 84, but 85 would be the number. And we really look to this program that's going to help us continue to improve quality outcomes and the consistency in care and coordination, care and coordination across the delivery system. We've been working with the Department of Correction on Medicaid eligibility for inmates. Right now, any inpatient hospital stays from inmates from the Department of Corrections are being paid for by state funding. With this change, we'll now be able to pay those hospital claims using Medicaid funds. So we'll receive that federal match instead of using the state dollars. This will become effective in a couple of weeks, and we estimate savings for corrections to be about $2.5 million.
Certainly, go ahead, Senator Brun.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do you happen to know, and I don't think this would necessarily, we just had a meeting up in our area where our local sheriff was very concerned about rising medical costs that he's going to see as a result of sort of the transition of the formerly Class D felons, now Level 6 felons, back to the counties rather than the DOC. Do you know, and I don't know if this is within your area of expertise, but is this something that if there's inpatient hospitalization of county jail inmates, would they be eligible to participate in this, or does it have to be a DOC inmate, or do you happen to know the answer to that, or is that something maybe you could follow up on? I know a lot of sheriffs are very concerned about the increased number of people that they're going to see, and he specifically mentioned healthcare costs.
Okay, yeah, we'll get back to you on that. I don't know the answer, so I don't want to misspeak. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, next initiative is the job training partnership that we're working on with DWD. As an agency, we currently provide job training services to our SNAP and TANF recipients in all 92 counties. We've been working together with DWD to develop a strategy to better align how these services are delivered. So what we're going to do is leverage the employment and training funding that we receive from SNAP and TANF, along with DWD funds, to help maximize dollars that would be available for these services. So far, what we've been able to do is we did a review on how best to combine these funds or services under the DWD Work One umbrella. We're going to identify some pilot sites on how we would combine these services, and then we would end up replicating that service model across the state, again, in the DWD regions. Okay, I want to give you an update on HIP. As you know, for HIP 1.0, the agency was granted a one-year extension through December of next year. I've listed some enrollment numbers in HIP 1.0 as of the end of November. You can see we're at about 61,000 enrollees in the program. There's the breakdown of the childless adults and the parents and caretakers. You're also aware, I'm assuming, that we have suspended enrollment back in July with CMS approval. So for HIP 2.0, we're still waiting on federal approval. I will say pending that approval, we're ready to begin taking applications for HIP 2.0 in January. This program will cover an estimated 350,000 newly eligible folks, replacing traditional Medicaid for the non-disabled adults, the ages 19 through 64. And I've listed what the expenditures to date have been, $15 million total, state and federal, 7.5 of that state funds.
What are those expenditures for? Is that just a programming cost to get started up?
Several categories. There are some one-time costs, which were things like computers and facilities. Most of the cost goes to hiring contract staff that would be needed to be part of, be able to process applications, answer phone calls that would come in the newly eligible. We have some state staff that we hired. There were some other contractor costs for technology system upgrades. Go ahead, yeah. Okay, I'd like to give a quick overview of each of our divisions and offices. The first is Division of Aging. I think you're aware that the division really puts together programs to try to serve the needs of Indiana seniors. We have a really strong focus and continues to be on home and community-based services. And we also continue to support development of alternatives to nursing home care. We work closely with the 16 area agencies on aging. The division administers 2 Medicaid waivers. The first is the aged and disabled. Second is traumatic brain injury. I've also listed some of the other programs and services that the division provides and administers. This slide shows the number of clients we're serving in the 2 waiver programs. So for aged and disabled, you can see that the number has increased over the last few years, while traumatic brain injury has remained relatively stable and flat over the same period of time. Our next division is the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services. Some of the main programs and services we offer through DDRS include our First Steps Early Intervention Program for children between the ages of 0 and 3. We have 2 Medicaid waivers. One is the Community Integration and Habilitation Waiver, and the other is Family Supports. The division also provides voc rehab, deaf and hard of hearing services, and services for the blind and visually impaired. Here you'll see the number of people being served under our waivers. As a reminder, you notice that back in 2012, the DD and autism waivers were replaced by the Community Integration and Habilitation Waiver. Support services was replaced by Family Supports. And you can see in 13 and 14, the numbers have risen in terms of number of people served under both of these waivers. Our Division of Family Resources, through the 100-plus offices we have across the state, the division is responsible for establishing eligibility for Medicaid, SNAP, and TANF. In addition to performing this eligibility determination, we also provide the employment and training services for SNAP and TANF recipients that I mentioned a moment ago, and we administer the Refugee Resettlement Program.
New program, Michael, the refugee resettlement. What is that? I'm not familiar with that.
We've had that program for a number of years. If you recall, we had in the years past, for example, the Burmese population that had come into the state, and that program helps get them settled.
That primarily use of federal dollars that are, is it a grant program that they have for us that we are the administrator?
Administrator of that program, right.
Okay.
Okay, this chart shows the number of, as of end of June, number of enrollees in each of our public assistance programs. So again, you can see in this last year, 2014, we're looking at about 1.2 million folks that were enrolled in Medicaid. Food stamps was just over 800,000. Our TANF population is a little over 23,000. And overall, we have about over 1.3 million Hoosiers that are enrolled in at least one of these programs as of June 30th of 14. Next, our Division of Mental Health and Addiction. So in addition to operating our 6 state psychiatric hospitals, DMHA sets care standards and provides funding support for a number of programs such as substance abuse prevention, mental health promotion, emergency preparedness, and suicide prevention. We certify and license treatment providers, perform quality assurance reviews, operate 3 separate hotlines, service, gambling, and addiction, and then administer the 1959 state plan Medicaid programs for adult and children. This is the list of our hospitals, which I think you're aware of.
Question, Senator Talley, I think, has a question.
you. Can you just explain to me a little bit, and the reason that I'm asking is because we just did some major changes to our criminal code, and we know that huge part of our criminal, population has either mental health or substance abuse problems. And some of those programs are administered through CJI, isn't that right?
I believe so, in the
All
Criminal
right,
Justice
so I'm trying to
Institute,
figure
yes.
out,
Yeah.
What do you do versus what do they do, and how do those programs intersect? Because I think we know that we're going to have to spend some money on those programs. Can you just explain that?
Well, I'm not familiar as how our programs align with some of the things maybe the CGI is doing. I do know we've had a number of conversations, even as recently with the Department of Corrections, to develop programs on how to treat inmates with various illnesses and that are incarcerated. Probably best, if I could, I'd like to get back to you on how we're working together with CGI or CGI to JI to see if I can get some better information on that, because I'm not familiar with how they're aligning those programs or how they work together.
Right, and I'm obviously concerned about, are we duplicating programs or is there overlap? And, we'd like to see a better picture of how all the substance abuse and mental health programs work together. Thanks.
Okay. Yes, be happy to.
Representative Cherry.
Chairman, on slide number 19, the number of TANF recipients went down significantly 2011 and can decline. Is there a reclassification of that, or?
No, the reason for that drop is back during that time period, we started to enforce the mandatory work requirements that the program required.
Okay.
Prior to that, we hadn't been enforcing those the way we needed to, and so when we did, that's the reason why the rolls dropped.
Okay, thank you. I couldn't understand why it went down.
I'll get to,
Members, if you have questions as we go through the different sections, please just go ahead and answer them or ask them, or a way that may make sure we get, since we're going sequentially here.
So the slide that we're showing now, you'll see how the number of folks are being, has increased in terms of community settings and being treated. That's in blue, and yellow are the number of individuals being served in our state hospitals. You'll see that's remained relatively flat these last couple of years. We are at 90% occupancy in the hospitals right now. Our Office of Medicaid Policy and Programming, Planning, administers our Indiana Medicaid program. You can see that in state fiscal year 13, over 1.3 million Hoosiers were served. At the end of state fiscal year 14, that number went to just over 1.4 million. The office administers and provides the Hoosier HealthWise program, which is our health care program for children, pregnant women, and families with low income. Care Select, which is a program for Medicaid recipients who may have special health needs or require specialized attention. The Healthy Indiana Plan, of course. Next year, I mentioned Hoosier Care Connect starts. The office also issues payments to Medicaid providers, monitors provider enrollment, responsible for Medicaid fraud and abuse prevention, and makes Medicaid health IT payments to providers who meet CMS meaningful use requirements. Our Office of Early Childhood and Out-of-School Learning administers the programs I've listed here, so the Child Care Development Block Grant, the CCDF vouchers, On My Way Pre-K, which we talked about a few minutes ago, PAS to Quality, which is our child care quality rating and improvement system. We do child care licensing and registration. We administer the school-age child care grants, which are grants that provide care to children between the ages of 5 and 13 for the before and or after school, during periods when school's not in session, and for any students who attend half-day sessions. The early education matching grants were the competitive grants that were available to early care and education programs. Last year, over $1.5 million was awarded to 30 different programs in 15 counties across the state, and it helped support pre-K services to over 400 4-year-olds. We expect this year to award about $2 million more to serve additional 4-year-olds during the 2015-2016 school year.
Senator Tyan.
Thank you. All right, I don't get what that is. What is that as opposed to On My Way Pre-K?
Well, the education matching grants were another program, I believe, that came out of the General Assembly last year, which authorized these grants to help support pre-K education in a number of counties. So counties would have to submit a grant application, and then awards were made from that. The counties that are part of the pre-K are not eligible for these grants, so it's a separate group of counties, separate, if you will, population of 4-year-old students.
All right, I guess I'm a little confused about, these are county programs in the EEMG?
These are, they're in the counties, but they're with, child care providers, and they, submit grant applications, and then the funding is awarded based on the evaluation of the grants to help support some of the costs for pre-K education.
But this is different from child care,
This is different. This is different than
vouchers.
On My Way Pre-K, and it's different
But it's
than
also different
CCDF,
from,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
So we have 3 different programs basically aimed at the same population? Is that,
Well, the CCDF, remember, are the vouchers that are available to eligible families to just pay for child care.
Childcare.
While someone is looking for a job, in training, that sort of thing. Those are some of the eligibility requirements. The pre-K program, On My Way Pre-K, is the program that, from the General Assembly, that I know you're aware of, which has the $10 million of funding to get the approximately 2,000 children for this next year to pay for their pre-K care and education. And then these grants were a different component, which were available again to the non-On My Way Pre-K counties to help supplement the cost and support the cost of pre-K education from eligible child care or education providers in different counties than the 5 that are part of the On My Way Pre-K pilot.
all right, and I guess my question still is, are the EEMG grants doing the same thing and aimed at the same population as the On My Way Pre-K?
They are the same age group, so it's the 4-year-olds.
Yeah?
obviously a different set of kids because they're in different counties, all right?
Who's paying for that? Where's that money coming from to pay for that?
The education grants?
The early education matching grant, yeah.
Well, I'll turn to Melanie, but I thought that was General Assembly from last session. Melanie? Melanie?
Remember, maybe you can help us, Melanie.
Early education matching grants were established in the 2013 session. They're only for 2 years, and there was $2 million.
Okay, I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, right. This was the House initiative that, Tim, yeah. I think this was a House initiative that we had, that we put in the budget year, sort of a pre-K pilot. Then the governor had his own pre-K pilot. We've got a couple of different deals going. That's the clarification I think that we're seeing. You remember now?
Yeah, but I'm trying to think that these are basically, it's basically this money going for the same things. It's
Same
just,
purpose.
yeah.
We're
it's-
just so excited about the concept, we're going to have 4 or 5 programs.
I think Melanie did mention that the
Senator
grants
Mixler.
that we just talked about were for 2 years, so this is the last year,
This
correct?
will be, this upcoming year will be the last year that the grants are.
Right, so these will expire.
Well, the kids won't. Senator Mixler.
114 kids on the matching grant at 2 million, and you're estimating 350 kids in the pre-K at 10 million. Why is there such a difference there in the cost for
Well,
fewer
the-
students?
Yes. There is a 50% match also on the early education matching grant, so the providers that get into this have to agree to at least a 50% match on those grants also.
And if I may,
This question's a little different. I think Melanie follows these questions. Why don't you try?
Sure, thank you. On my way pre-K, the 350 are just those children that will be enrolling a second, much larger group in August. This was the early start, so cohort that will be getting in January. Not at all.
no, yeah, yep.
Good question.
The actual cost per care per child will be the same.
Okay, let's go next, yeah. Okay, and then this last slide shows you the capacity across some of the programs that we have. So for programs enrolled in Paths to Quality, as an example, there's almost 93,000 children that can be served. And the same goes for the rest that I've listed here in terms of licensed child care centers and family child care homes and registered ministries.
Melanie, are you going to be back with CC when they do their presentation? I mean, this is being run through FSSA, and you work at FSSA, but you're helping to coordinate the education side of the other part of this program with the Department of Education and so on and so forth. So I don't know, I guess, is today the day we ought to be asking you questions about this because this is FSSA? Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. So if you wouldn't mind coming up to the mic because we're webcasting this and it'd be helpful for us to be able to, for people who may be listening to this. So help me once again, and I know that I've asked you this question in other situations, but I want to try to elucidate on this a little bit more here in the budget hearing. So the Paths to Quality, this is an evaluation on your part of the people that we have in position to do a pre-K program and how much capacity you have in these different areas. Is that what this is? Is this an inventory type of measure?
It's looking at how many children can we serve in
Yeah.
our regulated early care and education. But the paths to quality numbers of a little over 92,000 children include paths to quality providers at levels 1 through 4.
Okay.
So not all of them are going to be qualified for pre-K.
Okay, that's a good distinction to remember. Do you know how many would be in the level where they are acceptable to the DOE and their standards of being prepared for school? Do you know how much capacity you have in that regard?
2,400, give or take, 2,460 providers, 804 of them are rated at levels 3 and 4.
Which would be an acceptable performance to be preparing for school, because that's what the pre-K program is all about.
So a few really key components at a level 3 or level 4, including the use of a curriculum that aligns with the
Okay.
early learning guidelines, things like that.
Right. So if you said 800 out of 2,400, that would be about a third. So do those institutions have about a third of that overall capacity then, or is the number dramatically different from that?
That's about right. I don't have the exact number with me, but that is about right. Now, that is statewide. So when we're
Right.
looking at the pre-K pilots, there is capacity building work being done in each county.
Okay. And then one of the questions that I've asked you previously, but I think it would be beneficial for you, for this committee to hear, or this group to hear again, is that this has, on the pre-K program that you're doing the study on, this has been set up so that those programs, even though they're being run by FSSA, the educational components have been coordinated with the DOE so that the children are ready for school. In other words, there's a continuum, and we're all on the same page in terms of what we're trying to expect out of this. Is that right?
Absolutely true. We're coordinating very closely with the State Board of Education, Department of Education, and CECI.
Okay. And then have you had a chance to, I know I've kind of hounded you all about, what about the $115 million a year we spend on Head Start here in Indiana? Why don't we go to the feds and see if we can't use that money for this purpose and use it in a better way? The reports from the feds, depending on how you read it or who interprets it, tend to indicate that Head Start is not really quite fulfilling its mission, and it certainly wouldn't be fulfilling our mission if we're comparing DOE standards with what we want to do on this. So have we looked to see what it would take to have that money be used for this? And then secondly, the question would be, trying to think this through. I've lost my thought here just a second, but I guess what I'm trying to figure out is whether the children who are eligible for Head Start match up to the kind of children that we're trying to get into this program in terms of coming from a demographic that says they need this service. And then going beyond that, I think one of the things that we were trying to require in our program is that the family itself show some engagement and involvement in this. And I don't know if you're building that into your program or not. And then I wonder, do the ones who I assume are in Head Start, it would seem like they come from the families that probably most need the help of being prepared to have their child be ready for school and participate. So I'm trying to figure out how we get the focus on that group that's the one that needs it the most. And so could you just address a little bit of that? Have you done anything in that regard, or have you thought about it, about where we should be trying to go on that?
Absolutely. And The eligibility requirements sort of across the board, about 127% of federal poverty or below is the target audience. And those are at-risk children who benefit the most from a high-quality early learning experience. So it's very important to us that we coordinate all of our resources, our CCDF, our federal Head Start dollars, like
Okay.
you said, as well as the state funding and the matching dollars as
Right.
well. So along with the lines of Head Start, in Indiana, about 2/3 of our Head Start programs actually voluntarily participate in Paths to Quality. And
Okay.
many of our Head Starts are highly rated.
Good.
Yeah.
So we're kind of we're bridging that gap with what we're doing. And then, okay, going even a little bit further then, a lot of schools that have a fair amount of Title I dollars are actually starting programs with Title I dollars in the schools themselves. So I assume that they're generally in compliance with what we're trying to get done, so those children are being prepared. But one of the problems that we have with any federal dollar program is that if we initiate a state program, then Title I dollars are not allowed, they can't be allowed to use to supplant a state program. So has somebody worked through this relationship so that we're not losing the ability to use Title I dollars for this going forward?
Absolutely, and many states are able to successfully braid or layer their funding without
Okay.
jeopardizing any federal
Okay.
funding. Working with the Department of Education, and there's significant guidance online for public schools on
Okay.
how to use their Title I in conjunction with other funding streams that are available.
Okay, okay.
Then the public schools will also, we have a pathway for them on Paths to Quality. And in order for the public pre-K to participate in On My Way pre-K, they will also be at Level 3 or Level 4 of Paths to Quality.
Okay. So it seems to me that as we kind of debate this out and argue it out about who ought to be doing what and what the parents ought to be doing and all of these things that we've kind of raised here, we need for somebody to kind of keep all these different elements in mind and be thinking down the road, once we quit experimenting, how you get all this bundled together so that it works most effectively. So is FSSA and you and your office as part of FSSA, are you thinking in those terms?
We absolutely are, and working toward that even now as we look at the different programs that are all available, making sure that we're utilizing those resources and looking at other successful models. And so several states utilize sort of a collaborative approach to their early learning.
Okay. Well, I think that's real important down the road for us because we're on a lot of different tracks right now.
And each one of those programs is being evaluated by a third-party evaluator, so
Okay.
we'll be able to see what really works and what we should best invest in.
Okay. Then let's go back to this component of what should the parents' involvement in this be, or how much parent engagement should there be, or how much parent training should there be by people who are running the programs. Have you been able to come up with any ways to make this be a workable proposition? I think the WIC program is actually a parallel to this in a sense because the people that run the WIC offices don't allow the parent just to come in and have the WIC people take care of the nutrition needs and the health care check and things that they do in that office without the parent actually learning something and being engaged in this process and taking on some responsibility, which I really appreciate. So I'm hoping that as you work on this, that component is being worked on as an important element of the process. So can you help me with some thoughts on that?
For both On My Way Pre-K and Head Start programs, early education matching grant programs, each provider has to agree to offer family engagement activities.
Okay.
On the flip side, the parent must agree to participate in them,
Okay.
and it's a condition of eligibility.
Okay,
Now,
good.
what that looks like the Indiana Early Learning Advisory Committee is working on providing those tools to make sure the types of family engagement activities
Okay.
are meaningful and lead to improved child outcomes.
Okay, good. Well, we've got to try at least. And just as a side comment, one of the things that they ran into with the WIC program, surprisingly enough, they're having a little trouble keeping people enrolled in the WIC program because it's become so much easier just to go get food stamps, and food stamps don't require any responsibility on your part. You just go in and get them. And so I'm disappointed that we're not trying to work to find ways to help people figure out how to be a good parent, or be a part of the problem-solving unit there. So I hope that we will try to work this through, and I'm counting on you to help us do that, okay?
Opportunity to do that.
Great, thank you. Yes, Representative Klinker.
I'd like to thank you very much for your Path to Quality. I serve on a board in Lafayette where we have the Path to Quality, and they work very hard to achieve that, and the parents do have to be part of that. And in our Head Start program, many of the parents, several of whom happen to be Hispanic, do come not only participate in the program, but they work for the program. They've had an opportunity to be hired. So both of those programs are working very well in our area, but the Path to Quality has proven to be wonderful for many of our daycare programs. They're very well run, and the parents appreciate that. I just want you to know that it's a very positive program. Thank you.
And I do know, Head Start nationally has certainly gotten a bad reputation. But our Head Starts in Indiana, when we look at last year's performance data, are greatly exceeding all the minimum standards for Head Start performance. So we do have a good set of Head Starts here in Indiana.
For helping me there.
Thank you.
Sorry I didn't ask you, Michael, but we had the expert here, so.
Have to apologize. I was just going to say how grateful I think we all are that Melanie was here. All right. Continue?
Please.
Okay. Good. Yep. Keep going. Yeah. Okay, so here is an overview of our 2016-17 budget. You can see our fiscal year 15 appropriation was just over $3 billion. The decrease in the baseline budget reflects the 3% reserve from the 2015 appropriation. And the requests for 2016 and 2017 each includes a $10 million change package for the pre-K pilot program.
Questions from the committee here about this presentation?
Senator.
Yes,
Yeah,
Chairman
thank
Brown.
you. Thank you, Senator Kenley. An area that is under Child Psychiatric Service Fund was related to getting social workers into schools to help with graduations and drug addiction problems and family situations. And I know Youth First has been involved. Are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with the Youth First program. I know that we've recently had some conversations with them. They've come up to our office to talk further.
Okay, the question I think I have as we go further down this path is could they be implemental, could they be a resource or used as an implement to take away the pressures of general education funding that are diverted from education funding that are really social services? And how would you respond? How could we use that differently?
What I'd like to do is Kevin Moore, who's our director from the Mental Health and Addiction Division, wasn't able to be here. I'd like to talk further with him, if I may, and follow up with you.
Okay, I appreciate that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee members, we're going to meet tomorrow morning, starting at 9, and we'll be done at noon. So thank you for your attendance today. Does anybody have anything they want to bring up at this point in time? Remember, 9 o'clock in the morning, a little earlier than we started today. So we stand adjourned until tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thank you.